So this is how I made a detachable hood. So I've made this pattern. I thought if I put it on this grid board, it makes it easier for you to see what the measurements are. So that starts obviously at 1, goes to 36, and it goes up to 39 in height. Now I think I've got quite a small head, so I don't know, you might want to make it a little bit longer. So this is where it gets attached to the neck. That's the line where I'm going to end up folding it to create a facing. That's where you need to cut for the lining, and that's with me including a seam allowance. Oh, you need to cut 2 in the fabric and then 2 in the lining where you stop here. So I've cut my fabric out, and I've also cut a bit of interfacing because I know that I'm going to need to reinforce this bit along here because I will be doing buttonholes there a little bit later. So I've done that on both sides, and I've just taken it up to there. That's the facing that folds back. Okay, so that's that part. And then the lining, do you remember I said for the lining you need to stop there, which I've done, and that allows for the seam allowance, so it gets attached onto there. Okay, now I really recommend doing notches. It always makes life easier. So let's take the lining off, and the first thing that we need to do is either do a buttonhole or put an eyelet here. Now I'm going to put an eyelet there. I don't enjoy doing eyelets because I find it quite nerve-wracking, because if you make a mistake then that's it. So I've marked where my eyelet's going to go because I want it to fall so that when I thread a drawstring through this hem bit here, it comes out there. So you don't want it too close to the edge, and you don't want it too close to where you're going to stitch down your facing, so hopefully that's about right. And you also don't want it too close to the bottom. You'll have a hem that will be like that. So let's do the eyelet. So I'm going to use one of these for making my hole. Now what's very important is this. You don't want to go through your facing and your hood. You just want to go through the hood. So mark it out first and do put some sort of interfacing underneath. I'm just going to squeeze. So I managed to do the hole. I really don't like this. Okay, so according to the instructions, the washer goes where that nipply bit is, and the washer's the thing I want on the back. Going to put that on there. Now what I do recommend is that you make your hole a bit smaller than it needs to be, only a little bit smaller. I'm going to put that the right way round on the right side of the fabric. You can tell I don't like this. And then making sure the fabric's out of the way, just squeeze, and then when it's done it will look like that, which is good. And look how nice the back looks. So you've got to do that on both sides, even though my other one looks a bit different. Now you can do this just as a buttonhole, okay? There's no need for it to be an eyelet, but I'm going to show you buttonholes in a minute. So when you've done that, you then need to put your fabric right sides together on your lining and on your hood, and then you're just going to stitch around this seam. So you're stitching around the kind of head of the hood, and do that on your lining as well. So when you've turned it the right way round and given it a press, you end up with this and this. Now What we have to do is we've got to get the lining, turn it inside out and simply put it around the hood. So we're attaching the lining right sides together, so shiny side together, and we're going all the way around the top of the hood where your head is, going all the way down to the bottom. Now I really recommend doing notches to make sure that your slippery lining lines up with your fabric. So when you've stitched your lining all the way around, turn it the right way round. Now I've already turned it the right way round and I've actually given it a press, so I have cheated, but I'll show you. So you press back, yeah, you're facing, so it's all neat. I really do think it's important to press as you go along when you do your projects. It makes a big difference. So we've got a lovely hood that's beautifully lined, but of course it isn't attached at the bottom. Now before we do attach it at the bottom, can you give yourself some notches, like lay it out flat, lay it out and make sure you notch where the lining is supposed to meet with the actual hood, because when we turn it the other way round in a minute you can easily lose track and things can go a bit ski-whiffy. So before I thread in this complete clash really doesn't go with it drawstring that I took off an old rucksack because it had all the hardware and stuff, haven't got anything else, we need to do this. We need to bag out our lining. So this is how you bag out the lining on the hood. We're going to flop it all back again to being inside out and fabric right sides together. Okay, so it's now inside out. Now you're not going to be able to go all the way because you need to turn it back round, but I think about that much space as a gap for turning it around is fine. So I think to begin with I'm going to start there and sew back towards the facing. So I've stitched all the way along there with a ½ centimetre or, well, I don't know, ¼ inch seam allowance. You do what you want, but I've left a gap. Okay, now I really needed those notches. I was glad that I did that. Now you're going to have to do the other side as well, so making sure everything's lined up again, double checking my notches. I'm going to go down the other side of the hood. So this is where it attaches to the neck, but I have to flip it over. I'm going to have to do it that way round. Okay, so we've stitched across there and we've stitched across there, which is where the neck gets attached. Yeah, this is the top of the hood. Now I think I've left a big enough gap to turn it the right way round, and what I didn't go backwards and forwards there, just in case I needed to make it a bit bigger. Turn it the right way round as you would anything else, and it definitely feels like the hole is big enough. Right, so when you've pressed it, it should look very neat like this, but then you have this gap here. So this is the moment that we need to thread the cord through. So I'm going to put it in there. Got to put it through your buttonhole or your eyelet, but then you're going to have to grab it inside. So I'm going to pass it through the hole and out the other hole, but I'm doing that whilst I'm inside the hood. So coming out the other hole there. So I'm just going to get it in position. I think it is handy to get a pin up there because you want it to be trapped close to the edge. I mean, you can't see it, but I can feel it, that I've got the cord by the edge there. So I'm just going to put a pin, kind of trapping it right there, and then straighten it off down one side and straighten it, oops, down there. So when the cord is in place, now you can stitch down your facing, which will also create a channel to keep the cord in. So what I want you to do is, using the right colour thread, and for me that's blue, just stitch a little bit away from your facing, going all the way around the hood, and being careful not to bash into your eyelet if you have eyelets, or obviously don't stitch over your buttonhole if you did that as a buttonhole. Now whilst you are doing that, keep making sure that the cord is out of the way. So I keep pushing it over as I sew. Once you've stitched your channel, then your cord will safely stay in there, and then just put toggles, these toggles on the end, or just tie a knot, or just leave it dangling with a knot at the end. So that's kind of looking like a hood now, isn't it, really? But we've still got this hole. So stitch up this hole before you deal with the buttonholes for attaching the hood to the coat. So I hand sewed up the gap, but I felt it looked a bit plain down there, so I've also top stitched it as well. Now we're going to do the buttonholes. Now for my hood, I've decided that I'm going to have just one buttonhole somewhere at the back and one somewhere down here. And then when you've decided where you want them to be, you've then got to mark them out. So I'm going to have one buttonhole that's going to happen like there, and another buttonhole that's going to be miles away down here, and then I'll fold over the hood to make sure that I mirror it on the other side. So I'm just going to do 3 buttonholes because I just want to have 3 buttons on my actual coat. Now we have a sewing tutorial on how to do buttonholes, but I'll show you how amazing it is on my Janome Sewist 740 DC sewing machine. So when you do buttonholes, you usually have a buttonhole foot that looks something like this, and you have like a little section at the back where you can put your button that's meant to be the same size as the button that you're going to be using. But I always find with all sewing machines that when I do that, this buttonhole just comes out just a tiny bit too big. So I recommend putting a button in that is a bit smaller. Then you see that bar there, you have to line it up so it gets grabbed when you drop the foot, and then lift up the foot just to make sure. Now the other thing you need to do is there's a kind of black stopper bar that you have to pull down. That's mega important. When you do the buttonholes, it starts at the front and it goes to the backs. So in terms of your alignment, you do need to bear that in mind. And then, as you can hear, my children are killing each other in the background, and I'll kill them as well in a minute. So all I do is this. You can decide on a keyhole buttonhole or a regular buttonhole. So I'm going to do a regular buttonhole, and I'm not going to do anything to the stitch size because I've tested it out and I quite liked it just as it was. And I'm just putting my foot on the pedal. And that is it. I end up with a perfect buttonhole. Now I need to do 2 more of those, so I'll see you in a minute. And then in terms of cutting the buttonhole, I normally fold it in line with itself and just make a little snip first of all so I can get in, and then pass the scissors in up to the stopper bit, and then the other way. Now you can get a buttonhole cutter, and that you just sort of hammer it down. So that's it, we finished our lined detachable hood. And before we do that, I've got to add buttons to the coat in line with the buttonholes. Right, so I've attached my hood, but I thought I should show you how I've attached it, because I don't know, I think it works quite well. So when you put your buttons on, okay, so when you put your buttons on, you put them in line with your buttonholes, yeah? So I've put them along the neckline, and I'm doing it up that way round, so when I flop it over, it looks nice and clean. Okay, so there's the hood. You've got to imagine that there's a head in there. And from the back, that's the hood. So I've made the hood so it's detachable.